about himself.
Good morning. Good morning. Glad to have the opportunity to stand this morning just for a few minutes. I know we got a lot of speakers here, so hopefully it won't take too long. Lewis told me not to take over 30 minutes, so. Most of you know who I am. I'm Greg Bowen, my wife Carol. We live over in Folsom, been there since the 70s. She's been there all her life. And I have a heart for my community. I have a heart for children. That's why I'm running for school board, along with I feel like we need leadership. We've got a lot of image problems, I believe, with our school board in Bartow County. And I'm hoping that I can bring some professionalism and some stabilizing influence. Just to clarify, since we have two school board candidates here, I'm not running against Fred. Fred and I could possibly be sticking together. My opponent's a lady from Adairsville. I've got to say that you don't have to open this box of chocolate without knowing what's inside. I've served 4 years before. I've been a past board chairman. And as one of the emails I got recently said, your record is very clear. Of course, that was, I think, a Democrat that wasn't too happy with me, and I was pretty proud of my record. My record is that we cut taxes 3 out of the 4 years I was on the school board. We built schools without borrowing money. We stopped borrowing money the TANs while I was on school board for the first time. We were able to increase student achievement. All the things that we, as school board members, should be doing are the things that we achieved because we kept our focus on what our job was, not on self-promotion. I think we have a lot of the wrong purpose on the board now, and we need to clean that up. So I'm asking that you would consider me for our school board, and I know a lot of you are not from Adairsville area. If you vote in Folsom, Kingston, or Adairsville, that's where I'll be on that ballot. But what you may not know is that everything that we do as far as setting the millage rate affects everybody in Bartow County. So I'm kind of doing the Jerry Maguire this morning, and I'm saying help me help you, because there's 5 votes on that millage rate, and so my vote will affect you. So wherever you're at, if you're not in my district, call somebody. I believe my race is going to be a very tight race. I think every vote's going to count. I know it's been very intense in the Adairsville area, and I'm out working hard, and I'm asking y'all to, as Republicans, that if we don't get the vote out, that's what our problem has been. That's why we got the president we got now. We've got to get the vote out, and that means we have to take time to make a couple of phone calls and say, get out and vote, and here's who I'm recommending. So I ask you to consider me. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Education is a big issue among Republicans right now. I'm going to actually start off with the first question. Right now in Bartow, if I remember correctly, we're spending somewhere around $9,000 per child per year. When myself and other members of the local party attended school board meetings and asked for a detailed budget, it took us quite a while to get it. But I received a letter from Dr. Harper basically saying, we'll get you the budget when we're done with it, but, the bottom line is we've looked at everything. We've got to raise taxes because there's no way around it. We need more money. Well, ultimately, that decision, they abandoned that for now. But my question is, in keeping with our conservative fiscal philosophy and our philosophy that less government is better government, can you tell us your views on how we can improve education without increasing taxes, how we can be more efficient?
Okay. Well, 2 or 3 things you said there. One, I congratulate the Republican Party and the people that brought pressure to bear, because we were about to get a 1.5 mil increase, and they backed off that. But they're still spending $6 million more than they're bringing in this year. So, as you said, that's just for now because of it's election year. If this wasn't election year, we'd had a tax increases, I believe. So next year, that's another reason why election is important. It's going to be even more important that we work off a zero-based budget, off a balanced budget. How much money you spend per student does not equal a better education, or we'd spend $1 million a student if it made everyone a genius. That's not the way it works. It's how efficiently you spend that money. You get efficient by getting to the basics. In the old days, you had a classroom, a room, and you had a bunch of students show up, and you had a teacher that was allowed to teach. And those students learned while they were in there. What we do now is we have all these sideline things. A teacher will teach about 40% of the time. The rest of the time, they're doing administrative duties that require requirements that have been put on them because of all these state and federal mandates. We need to get back to the basics, spend our money on what we're there for, which is to teach the students. So we need to get better educators, and I don't mean but I'm talking about we have to get educators that don't get disgusted with the system and move on to a different career. On the key curriculums, what we could do is we can choose teachers that have 25, 30 years of experience that have the doctorates. Let's get those teachers in those key spots. Let's take the other teachers that are beginning, put those in the less critical spots while they're gaining their experience how to teach students. And it's just like running a business or anything else. You put your assets where you need them to be, because what they're doing now is just the opposite of what needs to happen. They're taking the teachers out of the classroom, furlough days. They're cutting back on the very thing that we should be working on, and you cut the non-essentials. You don't give a superintendent a raise and at the same time tell the teachers you've got furlough days. That does not make any sense to me. It wouldn't happen without a no vote from me, as it has happened this year.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
What is your philosophy in terms of thinking outside the box in terms of education for students, and also involving teachers in decision making?
Well, I think that one of our problems is that we don't have local control, and local control is just not simply our state, our county. It's the people that's in the classroom. There's no one knows that student better than the parent and the teacher. But yet they have, a lot of times, the very least amount of input, because they walk into a meeting and the first thing they do is pull out all the requirements that this is what we've been told we have to do. And then they say, parent, teacher, y'all have to work within this framework, instead of, again, getting back to where the teachers have to say so. I don't have a problem with teachers leading the way and accepting that if they don't perform, then we need to have a way of moving that teacher out and getting one new that will get the results.
Okay, on that same note, what is your feeling in terms of getting waivers from either the state or from the federal people in terms of some of the policies and directives that they implement and that the classroom teacher has to follow, as well as the school principal at each school?
Well, when I was on school board before, we were getting, I forgot the exact percentage, but a very small percentage of money from the federal government to help with the food of feeding the children, those kind of things. But the requirements, the strings that were tied to that money, required us to spend more money than what we were getting. And I was saying the whole time, let's just cut that out. We'll just pay that ourselves. That's what you're talking about, taking out of the box. You've got to look at, what am I getting, but what's it costing me to get that? And a lot of times in education, it's costing you more than you're getting, because that's their way, that's their end of getting control.
In addition to that, as money comes into the school system, it goes to the upper administration, okay, and then they decide on their budget, and then they disperse that according to the number of students and so forth. In terms of the principals at each school, I know, for example, in Title I, you get money from the federal government for Title I students. But at the same time, having waivers, because there's a lot of favoritism on schools. I'm not saying necessarily Bartow, but a particular school may get some additional funds for for whatever reason, as compared to school B. But having the principals of those schools receiving more of the money rather than going to the central administration allows those principals, based on the needs of their students and their staff at the individual schools, to utilize that money in which they feel fit. What's your feeling on that?
Each principal should be given a general fund, not complete control of the money, but a general fund that they have a certain amount of funds that they can spend at their discretion, control at their discretion. But we're expecting them to give us results. So they got to have some flexibility there with some funds, but not all of it. But the way the fund should work is, first thing you do is you decide, it starts at the child. How many students do we have? All right, how many are we going to put in the classroom? Next step is that tells me how many teachers I need. And you work up from there, and that all drives, each one of those has a dollar value that it costs you to do. And you end up with a budget that way. That's not the way they do it now. Now they take the digest, and they're looking at how much money can we get, and then they all sit in a meeting, and they start deciding where they can spend it at. Well, I go back to the person who spoke before me. Just because you're under budget doesn't mean that you're not spending money unwisely. Let's look at what we need to spend, and then that's the budget we should set.
All right, one last question.
Bartow County, the school board released a budget this past week. And personally, I couldn't make heads or tails out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had an opportunity to look at that? And if you have, what's your opinion of it?
Well, they didn't break it down very well. They finally gave in to give it, but you've got to spend some time to really dissect it. They didn't
elaborate on descriptions of what stuff was.
Right.
You couldn't figure out what the heck they were spending money on. It was like a smoke and mirrors game to me.
Well, whenever I was on the board before, we would sit, and I can remember going line item by line item. And that's the only way you can get control of a budget. You can't look and group it or do it like that, where you put it out there and say, here's how much money we did, and then talk in generalities like, but we're not spending more than we did last year. Again, the achievement is based on where you should be, not on what you did last year. A lot of budgets are set up on, this was last year's budget, so we're going to get an increase. If we don't spend that much money, then it goes down. Your next year budget goes up or down. But that's the wrong basis on how to do a budget. Budget should be based on needs and possibilities.
All right.
Thank you for your time.